Really looking forward to today's discussion. A very special guest. In just a moment, I will be introducing today's guest for Webinar Wednesday. Before we do that, as we often do, we want to start with a brief story, and it goes like this. This is a true story. It's about a young man who I'm going to call Nathan. Now, that's not his actual name, but as they say, we are changing the names to protect the innocent. But this is a true story, and it happened just a few short years ago. It's a big day for Nathan. He's a sophomore in high school, and today is the day when he meets with his student counselor to plan his future career pathway. It's an interesting day for this young man by the name of Nathan. He's not really nervous, but it's just a little bit kind of awkward. You know, when you're a sophomore in high school, 2.5 years later, graduation seems a long, long way away. We all know that it goes by in a blink of an eye. But Nathan walks into this counselor's office and he sits down, and his parents are there with him, and they're going to talk about his future. His guidance counselor, his career counselor, I should say, student advisor, somebody that he has a great deal of respect for, is just a wonderful person. Sits down at the table, folds her hands on the desk, and she looks at Nathan and asks this question. She says, "Nathan, what university are you thinking about attending after high school?" Not what are your interests, not what are your ambitions, not what are your aspirations, what do you love to do, what do you see yourself doing? The question is, what university are you thinking about attending? Now, it's a predictable question in many ways. So many of our school districts across Wisconsin and across the country grade themselves on their number of students, their percentage of students that go on to four-year universities following high school graduation. They even brag about it at things like parent meetings and student programs. So we know that they're measured on that specific criteria. Now, they forget about the fact that a student may come back after 2 years because their four-year university pathway didn't quite work out for them. They forget about the fact that a student may earn a degree in an area of interest that isn't particularly interesting to them, or worse yet, that there isn't a job waiting for that student when they complete their degree pathway and they are, excuse me, saddled with a tremendous amount of debt as they move on from their four-year university. We don't measure that. We just measure that number of students that are going to the four-year university when they're done with their high school career. It's a predictable question, but it leads to all kinds of challenges, as we know. And it confuses Nathan because his whole life, his parents have told him, you need to keep your options open. You need to consider every single career pathway and choose the one that's right for you. How do we change this? What do we do about it? Is anybody doing anything about this? Well, the answer is yes, and that answer comes in the form of today's guest on Webinar Wednesday. At this time, it's really a lot of fun for me to introduce to you today's guest, Karin Smith. Now, Karin has a background as a school counselor. She has a background as a work-based learning coordinator. She's been the president of a nonprofit organization, and she's been a regional career pathway director. She brings a ton of experience to her current position, which is an education consultant on the career and technical education team at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. She has tremendous expertise in areas like academic and career planning, dual enrollment, and career pathways, all of which is guided by Karin's passion for working with schools, employers, and organizations so that students in Wisconsin graduate career and community ready. Karin, thank you so much for joining us today on Webinar Wednesday.
Thank you, Matt. It's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon.
And it's our absolute pleasure to have you. We're going to turn the clock back to the year 2017. And that is when school districts in Wisconsin were required to start utilizing what's called academic and career planning for their students under the guidance of the state's Department of Public Instruction. So for our audience that may not be familiar with ACP, what exactly is this?
Yeah, that's a great place for us to start. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out right from the get-go that even though that state mandate for academic and career planning went into effect in 2017, we have lots of school districts in Wisconsin that have been doing the work of academic and career planning way before that. And it gave us a chance to really learn from them and say, all right, how do we make sure that all school districts in Wisconsin have an academic and career planning process and all students have an opportunity to engage in that process? So we've got a long history of a lot of good things that we had to build on. The other thing I like to point out before I talk about ACP is really our goal isn't academic and career planning. Our goal isn't to make sure a student just has that academic and career plan ready when they graduate. It's that they're ready. Career readiness is our goal. We want to make sure that all students in Wisconsin graduate ready for their future career, ready for their next steps. And academic and career planning is the process that gets them there. So career readiness is the goal. ACP, because we like acronyms, so we say ACP for short, is that process to get there. And usually when we talk about ACP, we talk about it in 4 stages: know, explore, plan, and go. And that's what you see on the screen here. So it's all about how do we help students know who they are, understand what their interests are, what their skills are, know about the world of work and all the different careers that are out there and available to them, not just the careers that they see on TV or they see in their family, know about all the post-secondary education and training options, and then start to explore those things in a little bit more detail. And they often do that directly with employers and what we call career-based learning experiences. So, once they get a little bit of awareness, then they can start to explore a little bit more. And then somewhere along the way, light bulb starts to go on and they're like, oh my gosh, advanced manufacturing is a really cool industry. That's what I want to go into. And so that's where stage 3 comes in, where we help them come up with a plan. And part of that plan oftentimes is a career pathway. We're going to talk more about that, I think, as we get into this. But that ACP process naturally leads students to a career pathway. And then the last stage go is about how do we support them for success? How do we make sure that they're ready to continually update their plan and change it as life happens to them? And how do they get connected to all the supports that they need to be successful, including developing some of those really essential career management skills like communication, collaboration, critical thinking, all those types of things.
And all of those items are things we hear all the time, do we not, from employers that say these are the important soft skills, sometimes we call them, as students enter the workforce, as they go through whatever pathway comes after high school. So credit to you and the DPI for promoting that in the way that you do. Now, I want to go deeper into this whole Pathways initiative in a moment. But before we do that, Karin, I know our audience would love to hear what precipitated the need for this Career Pathways program in the first place.
Yeah, that's another great question, Matt. So in Wisconsin, we've had career pathways at the high school level for a long time. They just used to be called programs of study rather than career pathways. And when the federal government reauthorized Perkins to Perkins 5, it gave our state a chance to really rethink what career pathways look like in Wisconsin at the high school level and identify what are those critical components to a career pathway. So that's what you're seeing on the screen. If you go into any high school that is offering a career pathway, it's always going to follow this formula. It's going to be a sequence of courses. And then there's a couple of other options of different components they could offer with those sequence of career and technical education courses. It might be work-based learning or a college credit opportunity, an industry recognized certification, or a career and technical student organization like Skills USA. So that existed, and school districts have been offering local career pathways for a while now, meaning that an individual school district had to be the one to figure this all out, right? Even though the district next door to them might be trying to figure out and create the same career pathway. So we knew that there was a better way to do this, a way to reduce the duplication, to be more consistent about the information students get, and just be more collaborative and efficient in the way that we created career pathways. And that's where we came up with regional career pathways.
So I'm somebody that comes from the world of manufacturing. Anytime you talk with me about reducing constraints, making processes more efficient, I am all about that. And that's exactly what I think you've done here. A lot of times we talk in manufacturing and in the world of lean manufacturing about standardization, of making things consistent. And so the DPI set about to do that, to create standardized and consistent career pathways for students. But how did you go about creating those pathways? Where did you start and how did you know what to do?
This is where it gets really fun. Yeah. So I love working with lots of different people. And so that was really fun and exciting to develop this process that starts at the state level. So once we've identified an industry where we know there's going to be a lot of demand, looking at labor market, talking to employers, we say advanced manufacturing, we have a lot of job needs in that area. The first thing we do is gather employers in that industry from all different parts of the state, different company sizes, different subsectors of that industry. We bring them all together and we have them help us build this first page of the pathway to really help students understand all the different types of careers, especially the in-demand careers that are out there. You're not going to see every single career in the pathway listed, but it's meant to give students a really good flavor, a really good first look at this pathway and the different areas like production and engineering and design, industry 4.0, et cetera, et cetera. The jobs are linked to My Next Move, so students can click on them and they can learn more. When it gets to the regional level, we put in salary ranges. We also, indicate which jobs are going to be most in demand with those little orange starbursts. And then you'll notice that they're displayed by level of education. In general, again, there's no hard and fast rule, but we want to give students a sense of, hey, maybe I want to go right into the world of work. Here's the jobs that would be available to me right after high school, all the way up to here are the jobs that are available with a bachelor's degree and beyond. So they can start to see what that pathway might look like as they have those on-ramps and off-ramps throughout the pathway. So once we get that all together with our state partners, then this map goes to the regions, and the regions that want to adopt this pathway because they see a need in their region for these jobs, they gather together their employers from their region and they pick up where we left off, and they get to tweak it and change it and customize it for the region, add in those salary ranges and some other regional information. And then it's all ready to go to the school district. So by the time the school district gets this information with this first page, and we'll look at the second page in a few minutes, they've got information that has been vetted by employers at the state level and the regional level, as well as higher ed partners and other community partners. They just have to get to work on identifying their specific components for the pathway.
And I know that is going to be music to the ears of private employers, certainly of all employers. When the DPI set up these pathways, you didn't just look inside and ask yourself what should they look like. You went out to industry, you went out to employers, you went out to the people employing the folks that are working through these pathways and said, what's important? And I think that is a really, really important distinction in terms of how you went about this. I'm also proud actually to acknowledge that I helped out on a couple of those work groups as well as we looked at these pathways. So that was a real honor to be a part of that process. And it's really, really important. Karin, we can't hardly have a conversation anymore, and rightly so, about education, about employment, without also talking a little bit about diversity, about inclusion, about how we make these pathways available to everybody, particularly those in underserved populations. So talk with our audience for a moment about how you went about doing that and what this should mean to individuals in underserved populations around the state of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Equity and inclusion is deeply important to us at the Department of Public Instruction, and it's often or almost always at the core of everything we do. And one of the reasons we strongly believed in creating regional career pathways was to help level the playing field in and of itself. So remember, before this, it was individual school districts that were creating these local pathways on their own. And some of them maybe had really great business partnerships and got a lot of good information that helped them create their career pathway programs. Other districts didn't have those same business partnerships, and they're just kind of making their best guess. Or you've got larger districts that maybe have a dedicated person, that can work just on career pathways and engaging employers, versus some small rural districts where the person working on career pathways, is also a school counselor or a teacher and, wears several different other hats. And so we wanted to make this more equitable and more consistent so that every single school district and therefore every student has access to the same information. And that information is employer vetted. It's coming, like you said, directly from our employers. So that's one way that regional career pathways, just in the structure of it, addresses equity. But then we went a little further and are dedicating some of our Perkins funding to making sure that every region in Wisconsin has a regional career pathway coordinator. And that regional career pathway coordinator works with cross-sector partners, from K-12 school districts, obviously, and employers and higher education partners and workforce development partners and economic development partners and community organizations to say, how do we really break down the barriers to students being successful in this pathway? Looks good on paper, but how do we make this work, especially for our underserved populations? Let's look at the root causes of some of those barriers that they face in successfully entering and getting into this pathway, and let's figure out how to remove those barriers. So we're just starting that part of the work, but that's the most exciting part of this moving forward.
Just starting that part of the work with the regional career pathway coordinators and making sure that these opportunities, these pathways are available to every single student in the state of Wisconsin. Very, very important. When we think about those students and really all students, I want to go a little deeper now, Karin, in terms of what the experience looks like for a student. What are the certifications? What are the courses? What are the experiences that these students, as they're going through these, as they're navigating these pathways, if you will experience on their own?
All right, this is where I'm going to ask you all to take a little journey with me and try to, bring yourself back to your middle school self, right? And think of yourself in middle school, because again, it all starts with that academic and career planning process, making sure that students are learning about pathways, in this case, advanced manufacturing. And that can happen, in the courses that they take and through a software program we call Zello that students can use to do career exploration. They also happen through those career-based learning experiences. Could be a career fair or a company tour or a job shadow, and that's what leads a student to what you're seeing. This is what it looks like when you get to high school. But if you don't provide students with those earlier experiences just to learn about, to know about and explore that career field, they may never get here. So it starts with ACP in middle school. It also, many middle schools offer CTE courses that will give students a really broad foundation in some of these career pathways. Then once they get to high school, they can also access, more broad general CTE courses like Intro to Manufacturing, but they also can start to have, more specific courses like, say, a mechatronics or a robotics course. And then there's also all those other career pathway components that you're seeing here on this page. And this is an example of what that regional career pathway would look like by the time it gets in front of a student. So they would have that first page that we looked at with all the jobs, that big chart with all the jobs, and say, that sounds really interesting. Yep, this is something I want to go into. And then they look on the second side and they see something that looks like this, where they can say, okay, now this is exactly what I can do at my high school to enter and get a head start in this pathway, all the way from courses to industry recognized certifications to work-based learning to dual enrollment opportunities and career and technical student organizations.
And I want to play off of the last part of that answer when you just really listed out all of the different pathways that are available to students. Somebody might look at this and say, well, this is for a student who's going direct to workforce, which I think is awesome. If you've got the skills you need to be successful right after high school in the workforce, and that's your pathway, that is fantastic. But for those who are thinking, is this just for folks that are going direct to workforce? To your last answer, Karin, it really isn't. Tell us about what are the options for students, go deeper on that. And also, has career technical education changed from the old vocational education that many of us think about?
Heck yeah, it has. And Matt, your story at the beginning of today's session is really, really resonating with me. But you go back to years and years ago, a lot of people, when you say career and technical education, they think, vocational education of years and years ago, where it really was just focused on students that weren't college material, right? So we really had this career or college mentality, like, all right, either we're going to prepare students for college, or if we don't think that they meet that bar, well, then you're just going to go into the workforce. We'll prepare you we'll give you some skills to get ready for the workforce. Slowly over time, that turned into college and career, right? So that's a little bit closer, right? But it still kind of sets us up and saying, putting college as a goal, and I don't know about you, I don't know too many people where going to college is their lifelong goal. Like, that's all I want to do. I'm just gonna, pay a lot of money and learn a lot of interesting things. And maybe if you're really wealthy or, you win the lottery, you could do that.
I knew some, but it didn't end well. So agree.
Yeah, right. Usually college is a means to an end, right? You go to college so that you can get into a career, and so I hope we can start to make that transition from college and career to career and community. Because, right, those are our end goals. We want our students to be successful in their life, in their community. And a big part of that is the career. And again, post-secondary education and training is a really big part of that. But again, it's that means to the end. So you see CTE changing with those times. And now it's not just, the trades and, some of those other fields, but it's advanced manufacturing and construction and business and healthcare and digital technology. I mean, it spans so many different areas because it's really just getting kids ready for their future career. The last thing I'll mention that's really starting to change in CTE is we're starting to break down those silos between CTE courses and non-CTE courses. We're seeing teachers collaborate together. So a math teacher, and a manufacturing teacher might be working together so that when that math teacher is teaching math content, they can put it in the context of manufacturing. Or when the manufacturing teacher is teaching their content, they can kind of say, and here's where you're using, algebra or geometry or trig, so kids are making those connections. We're even seeing a lot of high schools create their manufacturing or fab labs right across from an art department. So those two departments can work together. So lots of cool things happening in CTE these days.
Absolutely. And I think, first of all, I'm never going to use the college and career ready term again as long as I live. You've transformed me. So forever it will be career and community ready. I totally agree. And I really, really love the way that you characterize this. I want to talk now about some of the partners, and we're going to have a couple questions around that, but some of the partners, not only that created these pathways or work with you to create the pathways, but also about their ongoing role with the pathways program. So let's start with folks in industry. So we know that these pathways were heavily influenced, as rightly so, by industrial employers, by advanced manufacturing employers, specifically to the pathways in industry and advanced manufacturing. What is that ongoing role of industry in the pathways program?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. Like, it starts with their engagement in just creating those pathways. I'll also add that every couple of years, we'll be updating these pathways because we know things are changing and the needs are changing fast. And man, we knew a couple of years ago that things were changing fast, but now with this past year and COVID, we know that that's really influenced the trajectory of many industries. So we need to keep that communication going with them and update these pathways every couple of years so educators always have the most current information right from employers. But besides that, we also are engaging our employers both at the state level and the regional level, and to look at those barriers, some of those things that are holding students back from participating in a work-based learning program because they don't have access to transportation, or students, that are struggling to get into our complete dual enrollment courses. So we're trying to create some of these regional conversations that are cross-sector where we can all kind of bring our ideas to the table and find really innovative solutions to break those barriers down and get more students into a pathway and successfully on the road to their career pathway. And then the last thing, but it's really the most important thing, is engaging employers in those career-based learning experiences all the way up through our more intensive work-based learning experiences like an internship or youth apprenticeship. So those are kind of the three areas that we really try to make sure that employers stay at the forefront of all of this.
And certainly on that last area, the apprenticeships, the work-based learning opportunities, Karin, especially now when every single employer we talk to is desperate for great talent. What a fantastic way for them to build relationships and pathways into their organizations for fantastic students. going through the pathway initiative on their own. So that's just a great way to look at that. Industrial employer is really, really important. And that certainly is one great pathway, as we've talked about, for our students as they're leaving high school and going direct to workforce, going into an apprenticeship program, going into a work-based learning program, or even experiencing that while they are still in high school. It's not the only pathway, and we know that there are students that are going to be leveraging this system, this initiative, and still planning on going on to two-year colleges, 4-year universities. For the right students, if that's leading to the right career for them, that is exactly what we want. And so I would love for you to talk now about the relationships with higher education, technical colleges, the community colleges, the universities. How is this playing into institutions of higher education and those types of pathways for our students?
Yeah, those are all the dots we're trying to connect, right, Matt? You know, going through the ACP process, figuring out, at least in general, what's the career pathway I'm interested in. And then you start to look at post-secondary education and training options, because you know something about yourself. You know, am I a hands-on learner? You know, do I really enjoy that classroom environment? You've got an idea of what your career goals are. And now you can say, all right, which post-secondary education and training option is going to be the best fit for me to get me to my career goals? And so that's our next step in this whole process too. You know, once we've created this regional career pathway and send it to the regions, now we're working with all of our higher ed partners, post-secondary education and training partners, to identify in each region what those options are. So all the way from, you know, short-term certifications or long-term certifications, technical diplomas, associate degrees, registered apprenticeships, all the way up to a bachelor's and beyond. We do some asset mapping in each region with our higher ed partners to say, all right, here are all the different programs that you have available to you if you want to get into one or more of these pathways on the regional career pathway map. And so this is just a snippet of one of the web pages that students would be directed to right from that regional career pathway map, and they can start to explore those programs. The other thing we're working with our post-secondary partners are identifying the dual enrollment or college credit opportunities. So there's another web page that a student could go to then, or schools can go to say, all right, here's the partners we should be working with to develop transcripted credit agreements to make sure students in some of our manufacturing classes are also getting college credit for it. Or students that want to participate at a college through Start College Now or Early College Credit Program, here are the courses that are going to make the most sense to them.
Just some great examples of the resources that are available to our students here in the state of Wisconsin and to their parents as they think about what comes after high school, as they think about what they want to do long term. I know that is leading to just tremendous amounts of success for our students across the state of Wisconsin. I want to give you a moment, Karin, to take credit for a little bit of that. Do you have a success story or two that you could share with our audience about how this is working in the real world of education?
I do, although I can't take the credit for it. I mean, this is collective impact, you know, in action. It's really all of us working together. But two programs I would really like to spotlight, knowing that these aren't the only two programs. There's lots of other programs out there like them. But the first one is the Smart Manufacturing High School Academy, which is taking place through Gateway Technical College, through their IMET Center. They're working with students, high school students from across the region, and giving them a chance to earn 8 college credits as well as a Intro to Industry 4.0. So it's really a great way for high school students to, again, start to get that head start in that field. The other success story or success program that I love highlighting is Cardinal Manufacturing. So this, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, this is a company that is inside a school. It's in the Levistrom School District, and they've been operating since 2007. They work with companies in their area, outside of their area. They do projects for companies that hire them on design, machining, fabrication, welding. So these are actual projects that they are doing, but it all happens right in the school district.
Two fantastic examples. Certainly we're familiar with, as are many of our audience members familiar with the great things that folks like Brian Albrecht, Ray Kakari, and many, many others are doing at Gateway and in building partnerships and great pathways with their high schools and for their high school students. Craig Sigalski and the team at Oliva Strom, another great example of how this pathways program and initiative can benefit students and benefit communities. So what a phenomenal discussion we've had, Melissa. I'm going to pull you right back in. I know that we've had a lot of question activity coming from our audience today, and we'd love for you to let us know what our audience wants to hear about and what questions they have for Karin Smith.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Karin, for all of your great answers during our interview portion, and to all of our attendees on today. Again, we still have time for your questions. If you have any, please submit those in that Q&A box, and we'll start to go through them. So, Karin, the first question that we got says this: we're already doing career readiness in our district, just not through the official Pathways program. What would be the benefit to getting involved with the official DPI pathway?
Believe it or not, that is not the first time I've gotten that question. That's actually kind of a common question, because remember, I said, you know, a lot of these things have been going on in our school districts for a long time. So as we've been working in regions with school districts, you know, those school districts that already have that sequence of courses and some of the other career pathway components, those are our champions, our early adopters. And it's really easy for them to kind of take what already exists and plug it into that pathway map that I've showed you. And what we've heard from those school districts is, even though maybe these classes and work-based learning programs and dual enrollment opportunities and everything have always existed, by putting them in that structure of that regional career pathway map, all of a sudden gives them this great advising tool to work with students and their families. So there's, I mean, just doing that one simple thing, you know, is a benefit, but it also gets them in that network of regional partners to start looking at those barriers and retooling, refining, you know, making sure that more students can participate in their programs. Because I know that every one of those school districts, even those school districts that already have strong career pathways, they'd love to serve more students, and sometimes there's things that get in their way. And so that's the real benefit for them getting involved in this, because not only is it that piece of paper, it's an automatic network of people that are going to help you grow your program.
Awesome. That's a great explanation, Karin. The next question, it looks like so the next question is coming from an educator who's outside of Wisconsin, which is great. We love having people outside of Wisconsin come on, but this question says, I'm not a Wisconsin native, but I am an educator, and I'm not familiar with how Wisconsin's education districts are set up. When you say these pathways get sent to the regions, who controls those regions, and how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so we had to figure that out too, right? You know, when we say region, what does that mean? You know, in Wisconsin, and I'm sure in other states, you can slice and dice your state like a million different ways. So we're like, do we use tech college regions? Do we use our CISA regions? So for non-Wisconsin people, CISAs are those organizations that provide professional development and support to our school districts. We also had regional economic development organization regions. And that's what we ended up landing with. Like, if this is really going to be employer led, we should use the geographic regions that we have that are gathering those employers together already around talent development. And so we got those regional economic development organizations together with our CISAs. And like they're the power duo in their region to say, okay, we're going to create these pathways. Our CISAs are going to help our school districts get this all up and going, and our regional economic development partners are going to get the businesses engaged, and then they work to get all the other regional partners to the table too. So that's what we did in Wisconsin. More or less, we use those regional economic development organization areas.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think we have time for just one more audience question. Karin, we talked a lot today about the advanced manufacturing pathway. And we know that manufacturing is a huge industry here in Wisconsin, but what are some of the other career pathways that you guys have worked on?
That's a great question too. I love it. So keep in mind that we're just a couple years into this, but we already have, in addition to advanced manufacturing, a pathway for architecture and construction, digital technology. We've got 3 different business administration pathways: finance, marketing, and business management. a patient care pathway. We're working on an education and training pathway that should be out later this year. We're working on revising a STEM energy pathway, and then we're also creating a general STEM pathway. And we'll keep going. Every year we're looking at that labor market information. What other industries do we need to create pathways for? So stay tuned, and then the next couple of years, those will keep rolling out.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like you guys are up to a lot of amazing initiatives, and we can't wait to see how that continues to grow. Well, thank you. And I will leave things to Matt to wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa. My thanks to our audience for being with us this week. Certainly my sincere thanks to our guest, Karin Smith, education consultant for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. You've seen her enthusiasm, you've seen her passion around the future of Wisconsin students, and it was really, really refreshing to hear about all the great things that are going on at the Department of Public Instruction. As for next week's webinar, we are going to go back to our every other week focus on industrial employers. And next week, you heard Karin today talk about third-party certifications and the value of those certifications in the education realm. We're going to talk about how we can use certifications in the private sector as well, how we can provide certifications to incumbent workers as they gain skills that will continue to be valuable in the world of advanced manufacturing. So you won't want to miss that edition of Webinar Wednesday next week. As everybody knows, we are here every single Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central. We will see you next Wednesday.